The Galactic Department of Planetary Classification had exactly 3 jobs: classify planets, file paperwork, and try not to accidentally start interstellar wars. On any given Tuesday, they were spectacularly failing at all 3. Flibbert Graxnox adjusted his 17 pairs of reading glasses and squinted at the holographic display floating above his desk. The display showed a small, blue-green planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star in what the locals probably called something insufferably cute like the solar system. "Seriously?" Flibbert's voice cracked like a teenager asking someone to prom. "They want us to reclassify this dirtball as a Class Omega Deathworld." His assistant, Quilliam Benderflex, nearly choked on his morning cup of fermented plutonium coffee. "Sir, that's impossible. Look at it, it's practically a vacation resort. Blue skies, white clouds, those adorable little continents shaped like, well, like nothing threatening whatsoever." The reclassification request had arrived via the standard bureaucratic channels, which meant it had been bounced between 47 different departments, lost twice, found in someone's lunchbox, and finally delivered by a very confused intern who was pretty sure he was supposed to be working in accounting. Flibbert scrolled through the attached documentation with the enthusiasm of someone reading their own obituary. Let's see here. Submitted by Commander Thaddeus Grimbleby of the 42nd Exploratory Fleet, claims this planet contains, quote-unquote, the most psychotically dangerous apex predators in known space. He paused. Thaddeus always was a bit dramatic. What kind of apex predators could possibly live on a planet where water falls from the sky like some sort of miracle? Quilliam threw his tentacles up in exasperation. "I bet they have cute little fuzzy creatures that hop around eating vegetables." "Actually," Flibbert squinted harder at the screen, "it says here the dominant species calls themselves humans, and apparently they—" His voice trailed off as his complexion shifted from his usual pleasant shade of orange to something resembling spoiled cabbage. "They what, sir?" They voluntarily throw themselves out of perfectly functional aircraft, for fun." The office fell silent, except for the gentle humming of the probability drive that kept their space station from accidentally existing in 17 different dimensions simultaneously. "Surely that's a translation error," Quilliam whispered hopefully. "It gets worse. They also voluntarily climb up enormous rocky formations, using nothing but their primitive appendages, then jump off attached to what they call bungee cords." Flibbert's voice was barely audible now. "And they do something called extreme sports, which appears to be a systematic attempt to achieve death through creativity. But sir, that's insane. No rational species would—" "Quilliam, my dear fellow, I think we're dealing with something far more terrifying than insanity." Flibbert removed all 17 pairs of glasses and rubbed his primary eye stalks. "I think we're dealing with a species that finds attempted suicide recreational. The next logical step, according to Standard Bureaucratic Protocol Manual Section 4729, was to form an investigative committee. This committee would consist of the most qualified xenobiologists, anthropologists, and threat assessment specialists available. Unfortunately, the most qualified specialists were all busy that week, attending the annual conference on Why Everything in Space is Trying to Kill You, which was being held on the luxury resort planet of Relaxalot Prime. This left them with Dr. Hobnob Flizzlebane, whose primary qualification was once successfully identifying a particularly aggressive houseplant, and Professor Wagbert Snifflebottom, who had written his doctoral thesis on the mating habits of cosmic dust bunnies, and was widely considered to be either a genius or completely insane, possibly both. "Gentlemen," Flibbert announced, as the 2 scientists stood before his desk, looking like they'd been assembled from spare parts found in a junkyard, "you have been selected for a mission of utmost importance. You will travel to this planet called Earth and conduct a thorough scientific analysis of its inhabitants." Dr. Flizzlebane's antenna quivered with excitement. Finally, A chance to study an actual alien species. I've been practicing my first contact protocols. What protocols would those be? Professor Snifflebottom inquired politely. Well, first you say hello, then you exchange gifts, then you compare dental records, then you form a committee to discuss forming a committee to discuss trade agreements. That's not, Flibbert began, then stopped. You know what? Just try not to start any wars, will you? 3 weeks later, the scientific expedition departed aboard the research vessel Probability Maybe, which was widely regarded as the second most unreliable ship in the fleet. The most unreliable ship was the Oops, I Did It Again, which had recently achieved the impressive feat of arriving at its destination 3 days before it had departed. The Probability Maybe was equipped with state-of-the-art scanning equipment that worked approximately 60% of the time, diplomatic translation protocols that had once successfully negotiated a peace treaty with a particularly belligerent asteroid, and a coffee machine that made beverages tasting suspiciously like motor oil, but good motor oil. Dr. Flizzlebane spent the journey studying every piece of available information about Earth, which wasn't much. The planet appeared to be what scientists called disgustingly habitable, perfect temperature range, abundant water, oxygen-rich atmosphere, and a magnetic field that actually worked, unlike the one protecting their home planet of Bureaucraxia, which had been on the fritz for the last 3 centuries. It's almost too perfect, he muttered, making notes in his scientific journal. No massive radiation storms, no acid rain, no spontaneously combusting vegetation. How do these creatures even develop proper survival instincts in such a paradise? Professor Snifflebottom, meanwhile, was busy recalibrating the long-range sensors, which had been giving increasingly bizarre readings the closer they got to Earth. According to the instruments, the planet's surface was covered in structures that defied all known architectural principles, and the inhabitants were apparently transmitting something called reality television into space, with the dedication of monks preserving sacred texts. "Hobnob," Snifflebottom called out, his voice tinged with scientific confusion, "you need to see this. The sensors are picking up electromagnetic signatures that suggest these humans are voluntarily subjecting themselves to something called traffic jams." What's a traffic jam? Near as I can tell, it's when thousands of humans voluntarily trap themselves in metal boxes and sit motionless for hours, while breathing toxic fumes and listening to other humans complain about the weather. Dr. Flizzlebane dropped his stylus. They do this on purpose. It appears to be some sort of daily ritual, and according to these readings, they actually get angry when this ritual is disrupted by efficient transportation. As they entered Earth's solar system, the Probability Maybe promptly lived up to its name by having its primary scanner array malfunction at exactly the wrong moment. Instead of conducting a proper scientific survey, they ended up with blurry images that made Earth look like a remarkably peaceful marble floating in space, and audio recordings that consisted mainly of something called elevator music, and advertisements for products that promised to make humans more attractive to other humans. "This is perfect," Dr. Flizzlebane exclaimed, completely missing the irony. A species so advanced they've conquered the concept of background music, yet so primitive they still worry about personal appearance. They must be in some sort of transitional evolutionary phase. Their first actual visual contact with humans came when they observed a large gathering of the creatures in what appeared to be a massive outdoor amphitheater. The humans were sitting in neat rows, facing a small group of other humans who were hitting a small white sphere with metal sticks. "Fascinating," Snifflebottom noted in his research log. "They appear to worship a sacred orb, and the high priest used ceremonial implements to honor it." "Wait," Flizzlebane squinted at the display. "Are those humans? Are they cheering when the orb flies through the air? Indeed, it must be some sort of religious ecstasy. How wonderfully primitive." What they were actually observing was a baseball game, but their translation software had decided that home run meant successful appeasement of the sky gods, and strike out meant ritual banishment to the shadow realm. Bim! Their second observation involved humans engaged in what appeared to be elaborate courtship rituals in large buildings filled with flashing lights and musical sounds. The humans would stand in front of mechanical devices, feed them small metal discs, and then either celebrate wildly or express apparent grief, depending on the patterns displayed by the machines. "Remarkable," Dr. Flizzlebane scribbled furiously. "They've developed mechanical matchmakers. The devices must analyze genetic compatibility and announce the results through symbolic imagery." "How romantic," Snifflebottom sighed, though some of them seemed to be taking rejection rather poorly. They were watching a casino, but their cultural analysis protocols had interpreted slot machines as sophisticated dating algorithms and the sounds of jackpots as mating calls. After 2 weeks of what they considered exhaustive research, the expedition returned to bureaucraxia with a comprehensive report that would have been hilarious if it weren't about to influence galactic policy. "Esteemed colleagues," Dr. Flizzlebane announced to the assembled Galactic Council, his chest puffed out with pride. "We have successfully studied the dominant species of the planet designated as Earth, and I am pleased to report that they pose absolutely no threat to galactic civilization." Murmurs of relief rippled through the council chambers. "These humans," he continued, "are a delightfully primitive species who spend their time worshipping small spheres, consulting mechanical fortune-tellers for romantic advice, and voluntarily exposing themselves to mild atmospheric disturbances they call weather. They appear to be completely obsessed with a substance called caffeine, which they consume in liquid form multiple times daily, presumably for its mystical properties." Councillor Baxterfield of the Rigel colonies raised a tentacle. "But what about the reports of dangerous behavior? The jumping from aircraft and climbing of rocky formations?" "Ah, yes," Flizzlebottom took over. "We believe these are primitive religious ceremonies designed to appease their atmospheric deities. Quite harmless, really. They attach colourful fabrics to their bodies and leap from high places as offerings to the wind spirits. Rather touching, actually. And their technology level? Rudimentary at best. They've developed a primitive global communication network, which they use primarily to share images of small furry creatures and argue about the preparation of food items. Their most advanced transportation consists of metal boxes that move along predetermined paths at relatively slow speeds. The report concluded that humans were a charmingly backward species suitable for limited cultural exchange and possibly recruitment as customer service representatives, as they appear to have developed an unusual tolerance for repetitive, soul-crushing tasks. The decision was unanimous. Earth would be reclassified as a Class Delta vacation world, suitable for low-risk tourism and anthropological study. 3 months later, the first wave of alien tourists began arriving. The Vacation Planning Commission of Zorgblatt had been looking for new destinations ever since their previous favorite spot, the pleasure planet of Relaxitron, had been accidentally destroyed when someone tried to make the beaches more relaxing with experimental gravity modifications. "Earth sounds perfect," declared Tourism Director Flabnozzle Weaselton, reviewing the scientific report. "Primitive but friendly natives, pleasant weather and absolutely no dangerous wildlife." The first tour group consisted of 12 families from various civilizations, all eager to experience what the brochures described as an authentic, primitive world experience with all the conveniences of modern space travel. They landed their tour ship, the Cosmic Wanderer, in what their charts indicated was a typical human settlement. Unfortunately, their navigation system had developed a slight calibration error, and instead of landing in the tourist-friendly city of Orlando, Florida, they had touched down in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. The first thing they noticed was that Earth's pleasant weather apparently included something called humidity that made the air thick enough to chew, and insects that seemed to view alien tourists as particularly exotic delicacies. "This is wonderful," declared Mrs. Flumplebottom from the Andromeda sector, swatting at something that looked like a flying nightmare with too many legs. So authentic. Her husband, meanwhile, was having his first encounter with what the locals called a vine, but which appeared to be a vegetative life form with aggressive territorial instincts and no respect for personal space. "Darling," he called out politely, "I do believe this plant is trying to adopt me." Under the tour guide, a cheerful Blorgonian named Skipper Fizzlewarp consulted his Earth handbook with growing confusion. According to this, Earth vegetation is described as mostly harmless with occasional flowering. There's no mention of predatory foliage. That's when they heard the roar. Now, when Dr. Flizzlebane had compiled his report on Earth's wildlife, he had somehow managed to completely miss the existence of what humans casually referred to as large carnivorous mammals. His research had focused primarily on the humans themselves, and he had concluded that any planet that produced such obviously harmless beings couldn't possibly harbor anything dangerous. He was about to be proven spectacularly wrong. The jaguar that emerged from the undergrowth was not particularly large by jaguar standards, but by the standards of beings whose previous exposure to wildlife consisted mainly of the domesticated dust mice of Planetoid 7, it might as well have been a mobile, natural disaster. "Oh, my Zorg!" screamed Mrs. Flumplebottom. "It's enormous! And it has teeth!" added her husband helpfully, "and it's looking at us like we're some sort of snack food." Skipper Fizzlewarp frantically flipped through his guidebook. "This can't be right. The report clearly states that Earth's apex predator is something called a human that spends most of its time sitting in traffic and complaining about Mondays." The jaguar, unaware that it was supposed to be friendly vacation wildlife, began exhibiting behavior that tourism brochures generally describe as taking an unhealthy interest in visitors. That's when the humans showed up. 3 members of a local research team, led by Dr. Patricia Wildwood, had been conducting a routine biodiversity survey when they heard the screams. What they found when they arrived at the scene was a group of clearly non-terrestrial beings having what appeared to be a panic attack, while a perfectly normal jaguar looked on with the expression of a cat who had discovered that the mice had learned to talk, but still couldn't run any faster. "Holy shit, Doctor!" Wildwood exclaimed, which her translation device rendered as sacred excrement of the sky gods. The aliens took this as some sort of religious blessing. "Please, O mighty sky god worshipper," Skipper Fizzlewarp threw himself at her feet. "Command your fearsome beast to spare us. We are but humble tourists, Doctor." Wildwood looked at the jaguar, which had grown bored with the whole situation and was now cleaning its paw with the casual indifference cats had perfected over millions of years of evolution. "Felipe," she said to the jaguar, "stop terrorizing the tourists." Felipe the jaguar, who had been raised in captivity before being released as part of a conservation program and was therefore more accustomed to humans than most wild jaguars, looked at her with an expression that clearly said, "But they started it," before padding off into the forest with wounded dignity. The alien stared in absolute stunned silence. Did she just command that apex predator to leave?" whispered Mrs. Flumplebottom. "Using nothing but verbal communication," added her husband. And it obeyed her?" Dr. Wildwood, meanwhile, was having the first contact experience of her career and trying very hard not to panic. Welcome to Earth. Are you okay? You look a little green. Greener than usual, I mean." Over the next hour, as the alien tourists were gently escorted to a proper research station and given medical attention for what appeared to be acute culture shock. "Doctor." Wildwood began to piece together what had happened. "So let me get this straight. she said to Skipper Fizzlewarp, who was now wrapped in a thermal blanket and sipping tea with the intensity of someone who had just discovered religion. Your scientists studied our planet and concluded that humans were harmless. Well, yes. The report was very thorough. It described you as peaceful beings who worship small spheres and consult mechanical oracles for romantic guidance. Dr. Wildwood blinked. You mean baseball and dating apps? What? And you thought this was primitive behavior? Compared to our advanced civilization, yes. We have evolved beyond such simple concerns. What kind of advanced concerns do you have? Well, mostly we argue about proper filing procedures and try to prevent our office equipment from achieving sentience and demanding workers' rights. Dr. Wildwood decided that this conversation required alcohol. Lots of alcohol. Skipper, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. When your scientists were studying us, did they happen to notice that we have a global network of weapons capable of destroying our own planet several times over? Skipper's beverage cup began to rattle against his saucer. Weapons? Or that we've been systematically hunting and killing the largest, most dangerous predators on our planet for thousands of years, often just for sport? The cup fell to the floor with a crash. Or that we've developed the technology to split atoms, leave our planet, and have actually been to our moon multiple times, not for religious reasons, but because we were curious about what was up there? Skipper Fizzlewarp made a sound like air slowly leaking out of a balloon. And that we've been broadcasting radio signals into space for over a century, which means you've been listening to our communications this entire time, without us knowing you existed? The sound stopped. Skipper had apparently forgotten how to breathe. But here's the really important question, Skipper. The question I really need you to think about. Dr. Wildwood leaned forward with the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. If we're so primitive and harmless, how do you think we're going to react when we find out that advanced alien civilizations have been watching us, studying us, and planning to turn our planet into a tourist destination without asking permission? That night, 3 things happened simultaneously across the galaxy. First, every alien tourist on Earth suddenly developed urgent reasons to return home immediately. The cosmic wanderer left Earth's atmosphere so fast it left a sonic boom that rattled windows across 3 continents. Second, the Galactic Department of Planetary Classification received a priority message that simply read, "Recall all assets from Earth immediately. Do not explain why. Do not ask questions. Just do it." Third, Dr. Patricia Wildwood placed a very special phone call. "Mr. President, this is Dr. Wildwood from the Amazon Research Station. Sir, I need to report a first contact situation. Yes, sir, aliens, multiple species. And, sir, I think we have a problem." Within 72 hours, the most classified government departments on Earth were having meetings that officially never happened about a situation that definitely wasn't occurring with visitors who absolutely didn't exist. The meeting took place in a room that didn't have an address, in a building that wasn't on any maps, attended by people whose names appeared on no official documents. Ladies and gentlemen, the person who definitely wasn't the director of an agency that totally didn't exist said to a room full of people who were certainly not the most dangerous individuals on the planet, "We have a situation." The wall screen displayed a collection of photographs that looked like someone had been playing an elaborate prank involving costumes and special effects, except the metadata confirmed they were absolutely real. As of 72 hours ago, we learned that Earth has been under observation by multiple alien civilizations for an undetermined period of time. These civilizations have been conducting unauthorized studies of our species and our planet. They have concluded that we are primitive and harmless. A woman who was definitely not the head of a military intelligence organization raised her hand. Primitive and harmless. Have they met us? Apparently not properly. Their research methods appear to have some significant gaps. They observed baseball and concluded we worship spheres. They saw casinos and thought we had mechanical matchmaking services. They somehow missed our entire military-industrial complex, our nuclear capabilities, and the fact that we've been systematically conquering our own planet for the last 10,000 years. A man who absolutely wasn't a former Navy SEAL turned it contractor, leaned back in his chair. So they think we're harmless? Completely. And they've been spying on us. Extensively. Without permission? Obviously. And they were planning to turn Earth into some sort of alien Disney World. That appears to have been the plan, yes. The room fell silent, except for the gentle humming of air conditioning and the faint sound of someone cracking their knuckles. "Well," said the woman, who was definitely not a former CIA operative, "that seems impolite." What happened next would later be referred to in classified documents as Operation Awkward Silence, though the operation itself was never officially acknowledged to exist. The first sign that something had changed came when alien communications networks across the galaxy began experiencing what they politely called technical difficulties. The galactic internet, which had operated smoothly for over 3,000 years, suddenly began displaying error messages in a language that nobody recognized, but everyone somehow understood. The messages were simple, direct, and deeply unsettling. Network temporarily unavailable. Please stand by for further instructions. The second sign came when long-range sensors throughout known space began detecting objects that shouldn't have been there. Objects that appeared to be artificial, highly advanced, and moving with the kind of purposeful intent that made military strategists wake up in cold sweats. But here's the thing that really got everyone's attention. Nobody could get close enough to examine these objects. Every time a ship was dispatched to investigate, the objects would simply disappear. Not destroyed, not fled, just gone, as if they had never been there at all. Except they left evidence behind, evidence that made very clear they had not only been there, but had been examining alien technology with the thoroughness of a coroner performing an autopsy. "What the Zorg is happening?" Flibbert Graxnox screamed at his emergency staff meeting, his 17 pairs of glasses fogging up from stress. "First, our tourists go running home like their tails are on fire. Then our communications network starts speaking in tongues. And now we have mystery objects appearing and disappearing throughout the galaxy like cosmic ghosts." Dr. Flizzlebane, who had been summoned to explain how his harmless primitive species had suddenly become the galaxy's most pressing security concern, was attempting to make himself as small as possible, which was challenging given that he was 7 feet tall and had 12 legs. "Sir, the research was very thorough. We followed all protocols. The humans showed no signs of advanced technology. They spent their time consuming caffeine and staring at small rectangular devices." "What kind of rectangular devices?" Quilliam Benderflex demanded. "Well, they appeared to be primitive entertainment systems. The humans would touch them and look at images of food, small animals, and other humans. Entertainment systems. Yes, sir. They seemed particularly fascinated by moving pictures of felines engaging in amusing behaviors." Councillor Baxterfield, who had been reviewing the latest intelligence reports, slowly looked up from his data pad. "Dr. Flizzlebane, did it ever occur to you that a civilization advanced enough to create a global information network might be using that network for more than just entertainment?" "Well, no, sir." "Why would they? Communication, perhaps, coordination, intelligence gathering." The room fell silent as the implications began to sink in. "Oh, Zorg," whispered Flibbert. "They've been watching us watching them." That's when the message arrived. It came through every communication channel simultaneously. Military networks, civilian broadcasts, even personal communication devices. The message was brief, polite, and delivered in perfect galactic standard, which was impressive considering that galactic standard was supposed to be classified information. "Attention, galactic community, this is Earth. We need to talk." The message included coordinates for a meeting point at the edge of the solar system and a time, 72 hours from transmission. We would appreciate representatives from all interested parties. Light refreshments will be provided. Please note that any attempt to bring weapons or recording devices will result in your immediate and permanent exclusion from future negotiations. Thank you for your attention. The message ended with something that no alien civilization had ever received from a first contact situation. A small digital image of a yellow circular face with 2 dots for eyes and a curved line for a mouth. They had been emojied by humanity. 72 hours later, representatives from 47 different alien civilizations found themselves gathered at the designated coordinates, staring at what appeared to be a small space station that definitely hadn't been there the day before. The station looked normal, almost disappointingly so. It was clean, functional, and about as threatening as a suburban office building. The only unusual feature was a large sign that read, "Welcome to Diplomatic Station Alpha. Please dock at your assigned bay. Someone will be with you shortly." Ambassador Kleptorius Noodlewisk of the Centauri Collective, who had been selected to represent the aliens because he was considered expendable, found himself sitting in what appeared to be a perfectly ordinary conference room. The chairs were comfortable, the lighting was pleasant, and there was indeed a small table with what appeared to be cookies and coffee. That's when the humans walked in. There were 3 of them, wearing simple business attire and carrying nothing more threatening than briefcases and coffee cups. They looked exactly like the primitive beings from Dr. Flizzlebane's report, except for one small detail. They moved with the quiet confidence of apex predators who had never encountered anything they couldn't handle. "Good morning, everyone," said the woman in the center, setting her coffee cup down with the careful precision of someone who had practiced the gesture 1,000 times. "I'm Director Sarah Chen, and I'll be conducting today's discussion. To my left is Dr. Marcus Webb, our xenobiology specialist, and to my right is Colonel Jennifer Hayes, our security advisor." Do Ambassador Noodlewisk noticed that the Colonel's definition of security advisor apparently involved muscles that suggested she could probably bench press a small starship. "First, let's address the obvious question," Director Chen continued. "You're wondering how a primitive species that worships sports equipment managed to build this station and locate your fleets across 3 galactic sectors without being detected." "Oh." She smiled the same way a cat smiles while watching a mouse try to figure out why all the doors have suddenly closed. "The answer is simple. We're not primitive. We're just very good at playing primitive." Dr. Webb opened his briefcase and removed a small device that looked suspiciously like the primitive entertainment systems Dr. Flizzlebane had described. "This is what your researchers observed humans using. Would you like to know what it actually is?" He touched the screen, and the room's wall displays suddenly showed a real-time tactical overview of every alien ship within 50 light-years, complete with detailed schematics, crew manifests, and what appeared to be security assessments of every individual on board. It's a quantum-entangled communication device with processing power equivalent to your largest planetary computers. We use them to play games, share pictures of our pets, and occasionally to coordinate global military operations, sometimes all at the same time. Colonel Hayes leaned forward slightly. "Your scientists also observed humans jumping from aircraft for fun. Would you like to know what we call those humans?" Ambassador Noodlewisk made a sound that his translator rendered as terrified curiosity. "We call them paratroopers and special forces, and the people we send when we want something handled quietly." She smiled. "The ones who jump for fun are just practicing." Director Chen took a sip of her coffee and continued. "Now, let's discuss why we're here. Over the past several months, we've detected unauthorized surveillance of our planet by multiple alien civilizations. We've identified tourist vessels in our airspace without proper clearance. And we've intercepted communications suggesting that our world was being considered for commercial development." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. We find this impolite. Dr. Webb touched his device again, and the displays now showed something that made several alien representatives quietly excuse themselves to use the restroom. It was a detailed technical analysis of every alien technology they had encountered, with what appeared to be improvement suggestions noted in the margins. "Your weapon systems are interesting," he said conversationally, "but your power distribution networks have some significant inefficiencies. We've taken the liberty of developing some upgrades. Consider them a gift. Your faster-than-light travel is also quite clever, though we noticed some instabilities in your dimensional phase calculations. We've worked out the corrections. We'll share those too. And your communication networks have some fascinating encryption protocols that would probably be very secure if we hadn't cracked them about 6 minutes after detecting them." Colonel Hayes opened her own briefcase and removed what looked like a standard alien plasma rifle. Except it was glowing with energy patterns that plasma rifles definitely weren't supposed to produce. "We've also been field testing some modifications to your military hardware. This particular model now has about 3 times the range, twice the power output, and a targeting system that can lock onto specific DNA signatures from orbit." She set it gently on the table. "We're still working on the safety features, so try not to point it at anyone important." Ambassador Noodlewhisk was beginning to understand why the other representatives had suddenly developed urgent bathroom needs. Director Chen stood up, walked to the window, and gazed out at the alien fleet floating in space. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to return to your respective governments and explain that Earth is no longer available for tourism, colonization, or casual observation. You're going to update your star charts to reflect that this system is under human protection, and you're going to spread the word that humanity is now an active participant in galactic affairs." "But," Ambassador Noodlewhisk finally managed to speak, "but you're just one planet. There are thousands of civilizations in the galaxy. Surely you can't expect to—" Director Chen turned back to him with that same pleasant smile. "Ambassador, let me ask you something. In your long and distinguished career, have you ever encountered a species that achieved faster-than-light travel, split the atom, and put individuals on their own moon, all within the same century?" "No, that would be impossible. Such rapid technological development would require what? An absolutely insane level of curiosity, risk-taking, and determination to push beyond any reasonable safety limitations." Ambassador Noodlewhisk's voice trailed off as the implications hit him like a cargo shuttle to the face. "Exactly," Director Chen's smile widened. "Now, we're not unreasonable people. We're prepared to be good neighbors. We'll share our technological improvements, we'll participate in galactic commerce, and we'll even allow limited cultural exchange. But it will be on our terms, under our conditions, with our permission. Is that understood?" The ambassador nodded so vigorously, his head nearly fell off. "Excellent. Oh, and one more thing." She gestured to Colonel Hayes, who touched a control on her wrist. Every alien ship in the fleet suddenly found itself surrounded by objects that definitely hadn't been there a moment before. Objects that looked suspiciously like weapons platforms, except these weapons platforms were staffed by humans, waving cheerfully and holding signs that read, "Welcome to the neighborhood and thanks for visiting." "Just so we're clear about our capabilities," Director Chen said pleasantly, "those platforms have been there the entire time. You just couldn't see them until we decided you should. Have a safe trip home." 3 months later, the Galactic Department of Planetary Classification received a new filing request. The form was properly filled out in triplicate, signed by appropriate authorities, and submitted through correct bureaucratic channels. It requested that Earth be reclassified from Class Delta Vacation World to Class Omega Plus Strategic Protected Zone, with a footnote that read, "Warning, inhabitants are significantly more advanced than they appear. Approach with caution, respect, and preferably flowers. They seem to like flowers." Also coffee. Do not attempt to study them without permission. Do not assume they are primitive because they enjoy simple pleasures. Do not under any circumstances suggest that their planet would make a nice tourist destination. They find this impolite, and humans can hold grudges for a very long time. The form was signed by Flibert Graxnox in handwriting that looked suspiciously shaky. At the bottom of the form, someone had added a small note in perfect galactic standard. Thank you for your cooperation. Humanity looks forward to productive relationships with all galactic civilizations. P.S. The next time you want to study someone, try asking first. It's more polite. Sincerely, Earth. Below that was another small emoji. A yellow smiley face wearing what appeared to be a tiny military helmet. The form was approved unanimously without discussion, debate, or the formation of any committees whatsoever, which was believed to be a first in bureaucratic history. And somewhere in a small office on a blue planet, orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, Dr. Patricia Wildwood sat at her desk, sipped her morning coffee, and smiled as she read the morning intelligence briefing. Her favorite section was always the updates on galactic attitude adjustments, which reported that alien civilizations throughout known space had suddenly developed a profound respect for proper diplomatic protocols and the importance of obtaining permission before visiting other people's planets. She turned to the next page, which contained a request from the tourism department asking if Earth was interested in developing cultural exchange programs with various alien civilizations, all of whom were very eager to learn about human customs, traditions, and particularly their approach to conflict resolution. Dr. Wildwood chuckled and made a note to forward the request to the appropriate departments. After all, humanity had always been excellent teachers. They just preferred students who knew how to raise their hands and ask permission before taking notes. Meanwhile, in a galaxy that had suddenly become much more polite, Ambassador Noodlewhisk was filing his final report on what historians would later call the Great Awakening, or the day we learned that quiet neighbors aren't always harmless neighbors. His report concluded with a single recommendation that was immediately adopted as official policy across 47 different civilizations. When dealing with humans, remember that they spent thousands of years turning their own planet's apex predators into pets, decorative rugs, and menu items. They did not accomplish this by being harmless. They accomplished this by being the most creatively dangerous species their planet had ever produced. And now they have starships. The report's final line became required reading at every diplomatic academy in known space. Do not mistake their politeness for weakness, their humor for ignorance, or their coffee consumption for anything other than a highly sophisticated fuel delivery system for the most terrifyingly innovative minds in the galaxy. 6 months later, the first official human galactic cultural exchange program began with a simple ceremony aboard Diplomatic Station Alpha. Representatives from dozens of worlds gathered to sign the Mutual Respect and Proper Etiquette Accords, a document that established basic protocols for interspecies relations. The ceremony was pleasant, diplomatic, and entirely routine, except for one small detail that every alien representative noticed, but none dared to comment upon. Every human in attendance, from the diplomatic staff to the catering crew, moved with the casual confidence of individuals who knew exactly where every exit was located, precisely how long it would take to reach their weapons, and had contingency plans for contingency plans. They served excellent coffee, though. The accords were signed without incident, and the galaxy settled into what historians would later describe as an era of unprecedented galactic cooperation, possibly because nobody wanted to find out what would happen if they didn't cooperate. Trade flourished, cultural exchange programs developed peacefully, and alien tourism to Earth became possible through a carefully regulated system that required extensive background checks, cultural sensitivity training, and a signed waiver acknowledging that Earth contained wildlife that may cause existential terror in species not accustomed to planets where evolution has been conducting arms races for billions of years. Dun. The waiver also noted that humans were generally friendly, but should not be startled, challenged, or subjected to bureaucratic inefficiency without fair warning. And in the deepest, most classified archives of the Galactic Department of Planetary Classification, there sat a single file marked Earth Lessons Learned. The file contained just one document: Dr. Vlizelbane's original research report, with a note attached in Flibert Grasnox's handwriting that read, "Never, ever assume that a species is primitive just because they appear to be having fun. Fun is how predators practice." Below that, someone had added in smaller text, also, "Never underestimate a species that can make beverages taste this good. Anyone who can turn plant matter into liquid motivation is clearly capable of anything." The file was sealed with a classification level that didn't officially exist, in a vault guarded by security measures that definitely weren't there, and protected by individuals who absolutely were not the most paranoid bureaucrats in galactic history. Because sometimes the most important lessons are the ones that remind you why it's better to be safe than sorry. Especially when sorry might involve explaining to your superiors why your entire civilization had been politely but firmly educated about the importance of proper manners by a species that had conquered their own planet's food chain, and then started wondering what else might be interesting to conquer. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. When you encounter a species that calls their most dangerous military exercises training, their most lethal weapons tools, and their most hazardous planets home, the wisest course of action is to offer them coffee and ask very politely if there's anything you can do to help. Because at the end of the day, the universe had discovered something that would have terrified them if they had been smart enough to understand it from the beginning. Humans weren't the most dangerous species in the galaxy because they were vicious, aggressive, or militaristic. They were the most dangerous species in the galaxy because they were creative, curious, and polite enough to give you fair warning before they demonstrated exactly why underestimating them had been a career-limiting decision.